Chris Farley's story is one of contrasts, a man whose explosive physical comedy lit up television screens in the 1990s, yet who could not find lasting solace in his personal life. From the moment he stepped onto the stage at Chicago's Second City to the day he last walked out of a Saturday Night Live taping, Chris was a force of nature, uncontainable energy, and unfiltered laughter. It's easy to remember him as the rambunctious guy bursting through coffee tables or dancing with Patrick Swayze in that now iconic Chippendales sketch. But behind the scenes, his life was a tangle of deep insecurities, overpowering loneliness, and a battle against addiction that eventually took him away far too soon. Farley was born on February 15, 1964, in Madison, Wisconsin, into a large Irish Catholic family. His father, Tom Farley, owned an oil company, which allowed the family to live comfortably, and his mother, Mary Ann, was the heart of the household. Chris was one of 5 siblings: Tom Jr., Kevin, John, and Barbara. The Farleys were known in town as a fun-loving, close-knit clan. They often joked that Chris was the loudest of the bunch. In his earliest years, he was the class clown at home, performing silly dances, throwing himself around the living room to make his brothers and sister laugh. Little did anyone know that this boisterous boy would go on to become one of America's most beloved comedians. Though he was full of antics, Chris had a serious side that only those closest to him saw. As a child, he was sensitive and caring, often reaching out to friends who seemed lonely or upset. He wanted to be liked by everyone. Despite his big personality, there was a hint of vulnerability there, a sense of worry about whether people truly wanted him around. Like so many comics, it was as though the more laughter he could produce, the more he felt he belonged. In grade school, he won the attention of classmates by clowning around at lunchtime, making faces or imitating teachers. If a friend was in trouble or sad, Chris tried to cheer them up. The seeds of his future were planted early, comedy as both a joy and a possible shield against self-doubt. His formative years were shaped by Catholic schooling in Madison. Even as a teenager, Chris struggled with his weight. He played football at Edgewood High School, where his size was an advantage on the field. But off the field, he felt judged for it. Teased by some, he transformed those taunts into comedic ammunition. He'd crack jokes about himself before others could, and that self-deprecating humor quickly disarmed potential bullies. It also earned him a reputation as the funniest guy in school. He wasn't content with small stunts. He wanted to push everything over the top, like diving onto cafeteria tables or performing pratfalls in the hallways. His comedic style was physical from the start, sometimes leaving teachers torn between laughter and the need to tell him to settle down. After high school, Chris enrolled at Marquette University in Milwaukee, where he majored in communications and theater. At Marquette, he immersed himself in drama classes and discovered an outlet that transcended the silly hallway stunts of his youth. He was introduced to a more structured form of performance, learning about comedic timing, character building, and storytelling. Outside the classroom, Chris was still the life of the party, organizing skits in the dorm common areas, leaping onto chairs to launch into an impromptu routine. Friends remember him as a perpetual motion machine, constantly seeking that next laugh. What wasn't always visible was the pressure he felt to keep that comedic momentum going. Even in college, if the laughter died down, a flicker of doubt appeared in his eyes. Graduating from Marquette in 1986, Chris decided to pursue improv in Chicago. If anyone wanted to test their comedic chops in the 1980s, the famous Second City was the place to do it. Home to legends like John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray, Second City demanded a level of spontaneity and physical presence that fit Chris perfectly. He started in the touring company and then got promoted to the main stage, working alongside notable comedians and honing his brand of energetic slapstick. Under the guidance of improv guru Del Close, Chris learned to harness his raw exuberance. People in the audience were stunned by his fearless pratfalls. He'd slam into walls, flip onto tables, or roll across the floor, never missing a comedic beat. He made an impression on everyone who watched him. Around this time, Chris became fascinated by the career of John Belushi, also a heavier-set comedian who used outlandish physical comedy to captivate audiences. Belushi's life had ended in tragedy, a speedball overdose at age 33. That cautionary note didn't seem to deter Chris. He admired Belushi's comedic boldness and resonated with the vulnerability behind it. In an odd twist of fate, Chris's own trajectory would later echo that of his idol, almost down to the tiniest details. It was a parallel that friends and family found both eerie and heartbreaking. It was at Second City that Chris came to the attention of Lorne Michaels, the creator and producer of Saturday Night Live, SNL. The show had a history of recruiting from Chicago's improv scene, and Chris stood out like a neon sign on a dark street. In 1990, he joined SNL's cast. During that era, the show was forging a new comedic identity with performers like Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, and soon Adam Sandler, David Spade, and Chris Rock, players who would define the spirit of early to mid-1990 SNL. Farley's style was shockingly vibrant, even among that already talented bunch. He wasn't the type to just stand on stage and recite lines. He was the whirlwind that swept across the set, literally throwing himself into every performance. His breakout sketches became instant classics. One that particularly stands out is the Chippendales audition scene where Chris, larger than life, danced next to a perfectly sculpted Patrick Swayze. Farley's comedic timing and total willingness to laugh at himself made it unforgettable. Another was Matt Foley, motivational speaker, a character who lived in a van down by the river, thrashing about so violently that cast members had to cling to the furniture. That unstoppable high-octane approach quickly won America's heart. But it was also a window into something deeper in Chris. He would do literally anything for a laugh, almost as if he needed it to breathe. Friends within SNL described him as the kid in the group, always seeking approval, always ready to buy the next round at the bar, or offer a huge hug to anyone who looked even a little sad. Off camera, Adam Sandler and David Spade became his close companions. They formed what came to be known as the Bad Boys of SNL, frequently partying together, pushing each other to comedic extremes during sketches, and forging a bond that audiences felt through their on-screen chemistry. Still, beneath the camaraderie, Chris was grappling with internal struggles that no amount of on-screen success could remedy. By 1993, Chris was becoming a recognized star outside of SNL. He continued to appear in popular sketches like The Chris Farley Show, where he played a nervous, starstruck interviewer who awkwardly fawned over celebrity guests. The premise was simple, but it showcased a side of Chris that was undeniably real, his own insecurity. Viewers laughed at how he'd stammer and ask, "You remember when you did that thing? That was awesome." But some insiders noted that it echoed Farley's genuine fear that people might not want to talk to him if he wasn't being funny. The lines between performance and real feelings started to blur. His film career began to pick up around that same time. In 1992, he appeared in a small role in Wayne's World as a security guard. He popped up in Coneheads, 1993, playing Ronnie, a sweet but slightly clueless boyfriend, to Michelle Burke's character. Then came his cameo as a bus driver in Billy Madison, 1995, another comedic collaboration with Adam Sandler. But it wasn't until Tommy Boy in 1995 that Farley truly broke through on the big screen. Starring opposite David Spade, Tommy Boy told the story of a lovable goofball who sets out to save the family business. Critics were lukewarm, but fans adored it. Its success came down to Farley's boundless energy and heartfelt sincerity. Audiences fell for Tommy Callahan because they sensed Chris's genuine warmth shining through. He wasn't just acting a part, he was giving a piece of himself in every scene. The dynamic duo attempted to strike gold again with Black Sheep in 1996. Although the formula was similar, Spade as the sarcastic sidekick, Farley as the wild card, the movie still resonated with many fans. Critics dismissed it, but a loyal audience found humor and comfort in that comedic style. Farley's ability to trip, tumble, and fling himself around with complete abandon made him one of the most distinctive comedic actors of the decade. He specialized in physical humor at a time when 90s cool often meant sarcasm and ironic detachment. Chris went the other way, loud, unrefined, and wonderfully over the top. But success brought pressure. He was at a point where the industry had sky-high expectations for him. Everywhere he went, people recognized him as that funny big guy from SNL. They wanted him to reenact bits from sketches on the street, to do that fall-down thing at parties. For someone with a fragile sense of self-worth, all that attention seemed to confirm that yes, people loved him, but primarily for the comedic spectacle. So he doubled down on being the jolly clown. The more laughs he got, the more he wanted. It was a cycle of validation that blurred the line between Chris Farley, the performer, and Chris Farley, the person. Privately, he struggled with a gnawing sense of inadequacy. He would later tell friends that he feared if he stopped being funny, people might not stick around. That fear fueled an addiction cycle that had started with alcohol and would expand to cocaine and other drugs. John Belushi's story loomed like a prophecy. Chris was aware of the parallels but felt powerless to change course. He partied hard with SNL cast members and other comedians in the city's late-night scene. And even though there were attempts at sobriety, each relapse seemed to deepen his despair. Lorne Michaels, noticing the toll that addictions were taking on Chris's health and performance, tried a tactic of tough love at certain points, temporarily removing him from SNL to encourage rehab. But even repeated stints in treatment, some say more than 17 times, weren't enough to break the cycle. Chris wanted to be sober, but he also wanted to hold on to the lifestyle that made him feel he belonged. Overeating became another destructive habit. As the weight piled on, so did the criticism from tabloids that seemed to revel in capturing unflattering shots of Farley, looking sweaty or out of shape. Publicly, he played off the jabs with humor, but privately, those images and headlines sliced into his already vulnerable psyche. In 1997, the cracks in Farley's life became undeniable. His last year was a struggle against a body that was breaking down and a mind tormented by self-doubt. He starred in Beverly Hills Ninja that year, another broad physical comedy that let him show off his slapstick moves. Again, critics rolled their eyes, but fans who wanted a Chris Farley movie got exactly that. The box office was decent, but it was clear to insiders that Chris was in trouble. His weight had reached a dangerous level. He was chain-smoking, and his stamina was slipping. Even simple scenes left him out of breath. In interviews, he sometimes appeared sluggish or spaced out. On set, he was prone to disappear for stretches of time, returning with an unsteady demeanor. The comedic magic he once summoned at will started to flicker. Hosting SNL in October 1997 proved to be a bittersweet milestone. It should have been a triumphant homecoming, Chris Farley returning to the stage that made him a star. Instead, it was marred by concerns for his health. He seemed frazzled, sweaty, and short of breath. He pushed through sketches, but those around him felt a tense undercurrent. The unstoppable comedic bulldozer wasn't unstoppable anymore. It was a painful reminder that beneath the laughs he was fighting a losing battle. Friends tried to stage interventions, but Chris, weighed down by shame, often resisted. He would say he was embarrassed or that it was his problem to solve on his own. Sometimes he'd vanish from Hollywood events or phone calls, only to resurface in a rehab facility or in yet another late-night binge. David Spade, who was arguably Chris's closest co-star, worried incessantly about him. Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, and others from the old SNL crew also tried to reach out. While Chris heard their concern, he couldn't break free from his own pattern. The intense partying, the emotional crashes, the cycle of regret, and the quest for more applause. He retreated more to his Chicago apartment, distancing himself from the glitz of Hollywood. His phone calls became desperate. Late at night, he would ring friends in tears, saying he felt alone and didn't know what to do. People in his orbit saw a man who was drowning in sadness, craving a kind of acceptance he couldn't quite define. Some believed he was haunted by a deeper fear, the same one that had followed him since childhood, that if he stopped being the clown, people would walk away. In mid-December 1997, Farley made a public appearance at a night spot in Chicago. Bystanders recall him looking disoriented, barely able to speak coherently. Someone had to help him stand. That sight rattled many. A few days later, on December 18, 1997, Chris Farley was found dead in his apartment in the John Hancock Center. The official cause was a speedball overdose, a deadly mix of cocaine and morphine. In a grim echo of John Belushi's fate, Chris was 33 years old when he died, the same age as his idol had been. The parallels were too stark to ignore. He was discovered on the floor, still dressed with his arm extended as if he'd been reaching out for help. The news shocked fans worldwide, but devastated those who had known him closely. Though some had feared an ending like this for Chris, the finality still tore at their hearts. With his death, the world lost not just a comedic icon, but a gentle soul who gave so much of himself to make everyone else smile, even as he couldn't find his own peace. Tributes poured in from all corners: Hollywood figures, SNL cast members, fans who had grown up watching him tumble across living rooms on Saturday nights. David Spade notably did not attend Chris's funeral, saying later that he couldn't handle seeing his friend in a casket. It was too painful. Adam Sandler, reflecting on their years together, described Chris as a human golden retriever, enthusiastic, loyal, always bounding toward the next source of joy. Audiences mourned the big guy who had done anything, absolutely anything, for a laugh. People magazine, Entertainment Weekly, and various news outlets covered his life story in heartfelt retrospectives, pointing out that behind his comedic mania lay a man desperately seeking acceptance and love. Despite a career that spanned less than a decade in the public eye, Chris Farley's influence on American comedy remains immense. Tommy Boy and Black Sheep, once dismissed by critics, have become cult classics. SNL continues to replay his sketches, Chippendales, Matt Foley, the motivational speaker, The Chris Farley Show, to remind new audiences of his remarkable gift. Younger comedians like Jonah Hill, Melissa McCarthy, and others who employ a certain physical fearlessness often cite Farley as an inspiration. For many, he set the gold standard for comedic energy, a total commitment that overshadowed any need for vanity or self-protection. One lesser-known aspect of Chris Farley's legacy is the near completion of his voice work for the character Shrek. He recorded most of the dialogue for the original version of Shrek before his death, though the footage remains incomplete and unreleased to the public. After he passed, Mike Myers took over the role and made it his own, but there are rough storyboards with Chris's voice floating around the internet. Fans who've heard these bits describe a softer, more earnest take on the ogre, evidence that Chris was expanding his range. There's a bittersweet quality in imagining Farley's Shrek, an alternate universe where his comedic career continued to evolve in unexpected ways. He also had a cameo in Dirty Work, 1998, starring Norm Macdonald, which was released posthumously. Though it was a small role, seeing him on screen again after he was gone served as a sharp reminder of what might have been. Another film, Almost Heroes, 1998, a slapstick adventure with Matthew Perry, was also released posthumously. While it didn't find massive success at the box office, it later gained a bit of a following among fans who wanted anything that included Chris Farley's signature comedic style. Beyond his film and TV appearances, there are glimpses of Chris's kindness that many never saw. People close to him have shared anecdotes of how he would hand out food to homeless individuals, sit and talk with them, or donate money quietly without wanting publicity. He could be incredibly thoughtful, especially when he felt someone was in genuine need. That empathy sat side by side with the demons of addiction and insecurity, creating a contradiction that friends still grapple with today. His older brother, Tom Farley Jr., authored The Chris Farley Show, a biography in 3 acts, which offered a deeper look at Chris's life. The book includes stories from family, friends, and colleagues that illuminate the struggles behind the curtain. The portrait that emerges is of a man who never stopped searching for a love that he feared he'd only find when he was on. The recurring theme is heartbreakingly simple. When the audience was laughing, Chris felt cherished. When the laughter stopped, he felt alone. Farley's story is often highlighted in documentaries and YouTube videos focusing on comedians who experienced the sadness behind the smile. Titles like The Tragic End of Chris Farley, Why Chris Farley Couldn't Escape His Shadow, and The Comedian Who Couldn't Save Himself dominate corners of the internet where fans dissect the nature of comedic genius and its sometimes lethal mix with personal anguish. Channels like Famous Grave, Celebrity Underrated Do You Remember, and Factsverse have all run segments about Chris Farley's life and death, reflecting on how someone who brought so much joy could harbor so much pain. In 2005, Chris Farley was posthumously awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, symbolizing the lasting imprint he left on entertainment. Then in 2018, Adam Sandler performed a poignant tribute song to Chris in his Netflix special, later reprising it when he hosted SNL in 2019. The song remembered the bigger-than-life friend who was always ready to destroy a table for a laugh. It was both hilarious and painfully sad, reminding audiences that the comedic mania was fueled by a heart that felt things profoundly. In recent years, rumors of a Chris Farley biopic have swirled, with names like Paul Walter Hauser attached to portray him and Josh Gad, linked in some directorial capacity. It's a project that intrigues fans because there's so much more to Chris's life than just the skits and the famous overdose. People yearn for a more nuanced portrayal of the man behind the pratfalls, his devout Catholic faith, his philanthropic gestures, his innate kindness towards strangers, and his unwavering desire to make every single person in the room laugh. If and when this biopic is released, one can only hope it captures the complex, compassionate spirit that so many saw firsthand. And so, we look back on Chris Farley's life as a testament to comedic brilliance and human vulnerability. He was a Wisconsin boy with a booming laugh who stormed the stage at Second City, leaving people in stitches. He became an SNL legend, flipping over couches as Matt Foley or dancing in a bow tie beside Patrick Swayze. He headlined films like Tommy Boy and Black Sheep, showcasing a lovable oaf persona that audiences couldn't resist. He partied hard, cracked jokes incessantly, and gave everything he had to each performance, almost as though his very sense of identity depended on it. Many fans still visit his grave at Resurrection Cemetery in Madison, leaving small tokens, notes, or references to his SNL characters. Some just stand there quietly, remembering how a big-hearted comedian made them laugh during their own tough times. They pay respects to the man who showed them that comedy could be messy, loud, and wonderfully vulnerable. In that sense, Chris's comedic spirit lives on, especially for those who grew up watching him. They recall a more carefree era, but also see the cautionary side, how easily the pursuit of laughter can become an escape from one's own pain. And finally, as you sit back and reflect on his life, you might feel a gentle nudge to reach out to those around you, especially the ones always making jokes, always playing the fool. Ask them how they're really doing. Laughter can be a lifeline, but it can also hide wounds. Chris Farley's story teaches us to look deeper, to show compassion, and to recognize that beneath the loudest laughs can lie the quietest cries for help. It's a bittersweet lesson wrapped in comedic gold. Perhaps that is Chris's ultimate legacy, the realization that everyone deserves to be loved for who they are, not just for what they can do to entertain the world.